Hello and welcome. I am your host, Andrew Ferguson of the UCLA Bruins Insider Podcast and writer for UCLA on SI. Today we're going to be taking a look at Mick Cronin's job security following the win against Purdue and what this means for UCLA moving forward. But before we get started, I do want to thank everyone who's listening right now. I can't thank you enough, and I appreciate the support dearly. But without further ado, let's get started. So we're kind of break this down into a few different places, like what UCLA's biggest troubles are, historical context kind of going into this, as well as what UCLA could be looking like if without Mick Cronin, if they decide to kind of part ways with him. But starting off, I think the biggest issue for Mick Cronin this season, it's a combination of many things: rebounding, defense, effort, to name a few. And that starts with roster building. Mick Cronin came out and said that it's his fault for building a team that does not want to give effort. But what does that look like? This team is full of talent and players who can score so easily. But again, that is also kind of a double-edged sword for UCLA, right? These players think they are all number one options. And to be fair, they are, if they were spread out a little bit better. Donovan Dent, 20 points per game with New Mexico. Tyler Bilodeau is Tyler Bilodeau. He's going to give us a lot of points. Same thing with Trent Perry. Eric Daly Jr. entering the season was projected to be a top forward in the league. We've kind of seen it here and there, but overall, not really. But that's the point that I'm trying to make here. UCLA has so much talent and players who can be number one options on other teams. But when they're all together, they feel like they are above, those passion plays, those gritty plays where they're diving on the court trying to get the ball. And we're not seeing a lot of that. I know we saw it a little bit better from, Donovan Dent and Trent Perry recently. But, that is something that Mick Cronin has tried to ingrain in their minds for the entire season. So now that we're just seeing it, it's kind of, where has this been all along? Right. But moving forward, UCLA has the talent to be a good team, except they are missing out on, a crucial, center or, that player in the five who's going to give you physicality and, 8+ rebounds per game. That is something UCLA does not have. Xavier Booker, is a good player. And like the others, he is a very good scorer when he is that number one option. Against Purdue, we saw him take, some 3-pointers. Is that what we want our center doing? Not exactly. We want him being in the paint, making those putback layups, at an effective rate, right? And we're just not seeing that with Xavier Booker this season. And that is not entirely his fault. He might not be comfortable with that role as it stands right now, but still, that it just falls on Mick Cronin for not putting the right players in the right positions. He's tried to kind of make a patchwork center, with the bench with, Steven Jamerson, Brandon Williams, and Jamar Brown. But still, UCLA is not getting center, production from those players. You can play them all you want for like 20 minutes combined, but still, if they're not producing what they're supposed to, for example, against Purdue, they had 0 points and they played 20 minutes. That's not exactly what you want from your bench. And while they did not play that much, it still just means UCLA needs more depth and someone who can play that physical role. Brandon Williams was that guy. There's a chance UCLA beats Gonzaga if he does not go down, because at the time he was kind of locking down Graham Ike and, Braden Huff in that game. But again, that's just all speculation. But something that is for sure is UCLA needs to have that defensive anchor that Mick Cronin has failed to get. And this is not a slight to, Jamar Brown. But Mick Cronin was very happy with that transfer. When he spoke to the media after Jamar Brown had a good game, I forgot what game that was. He did say he was like, oh, the media said this and that about him. He was not a good transfer. And Mick Cronin was like, hi, I'm laughing in your face. He didn't say that verbatim, but that is pretty much the message he was kind of trying to get across. And that smirkiness is not kind of something you want from, the UCLA head coach who's supposed to be giving us 30 wins per season, especially with a program of this caliber. But moving forward, UCLA really has no excuse when it comes to not being able to build a complete, balanced roster, right? They are, one of the biggest schools in the nation. People want to play with them. They are a, seasoned NBA male. Russell Westbrook, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Kevin Love, just to kind of name a few. Those are all great players that, recruits will look up to. And I kind of have a story to share with you. My uncle is the head coach for the Cal State Fullerton soccer team, and UCLA, when he had to go to UCLA to play him, they put him in Pauley Pavilion. And when he got in there, The only lights that were on all the banners, and that was an intimidation factor that really affected his team's performance the next day. But what I'm trying to get at here is that UCLA is a historic team, and if they're not kind of showing that, in the record kind of things, what is there to say? In the last 3 seasons, including this one, UCLA has not really made an impact. I believe they were 16 and 17 2 seasons ago. I mean, there was a lot of issues with that season. Obviously, the roster wasn't where it wanted to be. They lost a lot of players from the team prior when they went 31 and 6, but still. Last season they were 23 and 11. They lost in the second round to Tennessee in the tournament. And this year, right now, as we know, they are 13 and 6, and they're not looking that good. I mean, the Purdue win helps a lot. I will say it helps a lot that UCLA has that win on their category. No matter what, a top 5 team, no matter what the circumstances and context of that win was, is important, right? It proves that UCLA can beat the best of the best, and they have been close. They had Arizona on the ropes. So games like this will help Mick Cronin, come this offseason when his job is evaluated. But still, I don't feel like UCLA is living up to the Westwood standard, especially with, that UCLA men's team. Looking kind of at the other teams, the football team hasn't really been there. But this season, I talked about it in my last episode, how they can actually make a very deep run in the Big Ten and could potentially make the college football playoff if they play their cards right. The women's team is ranked number 3 and has looked absolutely phenomenal. They're going to have 6 players entering the draft next season, and that is something that no team has been able to replicate. But where it falls short is the men's basketball team. What have they really done? Obviously, they had that regional semifinal loss in 2022, I believe. But still, that is not what you want to see from your team overall. And there's a lot of things that kind of go into that. And I think if Martin Jarman, the athletic director, believes that Mick Cronin is holding this team back, there's a lot of questions to be had about his role moving forward. But again, to wrap back around, the thing that has caused UCLA to really, to receive a lot of scrutiny this season is the roster building, starting with center, right? It seems like every game UCLA has played this season, they have a 7-foot center that they're going up against. If UCLA has a player like that, who's 7-foot, physical, dominant on both ends, which I mean is a fairy tale in itself, it's not something you just come by. But still, like I said, UCLA has the history to be a good team in that regard. And alum are starting to buy in. I think they recently got a $17.5 million donation that went towards the football team and basketball. How Jarman decides to split that up is his job ultimately. But still, people want to see this UCLA basketball team do well. And Mick Cronin, there's not a lot of fingers to kind of be pointed at what is the problem, but I think a lot of those fingers can go to Mick Cronin for how he's kind of, handled this UCLA team. And what sucks is he is a very, good coach in this league. He is definitely a premier coach. If he does leave UCLA, he's going to get hired almost immediately. And you feel like if he decides to go into retirement, I don't know. That's not my job to decide. But still, UCLA looking ahead without Mick Cronin. What does a Mick Cronin-less era look like for UCLA? I think it looks pretty good on the other side. And what I mean by that is that, like I said, UCLA is a top school for coaches, players, and just like everyone in general. Even like someone like me, if I decided to go UCLA, I'd be pretty stoked. So what does that mean for a head coach? They're going to be really excited to coach UCLA basketball. And UCLA can throw a bag at whoever they want to coach their team. So finding a new head coach is not that scary if you're UCLA or Martin Jarman, right? The bottom line is UCLA basketball needs to return to what they were supposed to look like. And if this starts with Mick Cronin leaving or not, something needs to change. And again, I'll say it again, I feel like this Purdue win kind of stinks when you're kind of looking into the future of UCLA basketball. Because like I said, a top 5 win, no matter what, it looks good on a resume. So that might kind of halt any conversations of Mick Cronin leaving. If he can prove he can win at this level, keep him. That is exactly what we want. We want winning coaches on the team. If UCLA can wrap up this season, winning a few games here and there against, I think they have 4 ranked opponents. If they can split the series too, with a loss to number 3 Michigan, that is still not bad. Again, if they can make the tournament and, make a deep run, that's another argument for Mick Cronin. But we want to see a championship in Westwood soon. And if Mick Cronin can provide that in the next 2 or 3 years, I don't think he has a job at UCLA anymore, quite frankly. UCLA, like I said, is that standard that schools want to play for. In roster building too, Mick Cronin should have no excuses. If it was a different school, to name a random one, Colorado Buffaloes, them having roster building issues makes sense, right? They're not a UCLA caliber school. They're not nationally known as a successful franchise. UCLA has 125 national championship teams across their athletic programs. So what that means is UCLA really needs to get it going. I want to know what you guys think if Mick Cronin has a future here with UCLA. But that's all I have today. It's a real shame that this conversation even needs to be had, because I like Mick Cronin. I think he's a very, talented coach. His defensive teams in the past and the runs he's gone on were, something to look back on and smile. But we're not seeing that right now. And, in a carousel of coaches, success matters right away. And if Jarman's willing to play the long game, again, it's up to him. But still, as it stands right now, Mick Cronin needs to prove this season, because this season honestly could be very make or break for his job security moving forward. Thank you so much for listening. Again, I am Andrew Ferguson, a writer for UCLA. I really appreciate you watching this and staying to the end. And yeah, I hope you guys have a great day. Have a good one. Fours up.